produced by LaingBuisson, who are obviously one of the sector leaders in this area. I'm Paul Bridge. I'm the Chief Executive of Social Housing for Civitas Investment Management. Civitas Investment Management invests in social infrastructure across the UK and across Europe. Our primary area that we invest in is homes for life for those with significant care needs, either a learning disability, mental health issue, or other issue. But we also invest in other areas of real estate that support people's social needs, including homelessness and including care homes and registered care. Civitas was launched in 2016. We have 3 funds with £2.4 billion under committed assets under management. So that's enough from me. I'd like to introduce William Laing, who of course is the founder of LaingBuisson, and he's going to be taking us through an introduction to the 4th edition of this important report. Obviously, there will be an opportunity for Q&A. I'll also be inviting contributions from Martin Jones from Home Inspect and Andy Dean from Eden Futures, and they'll also give a short introduction to themselves and their companies as well. But do please use the Q&A button to come in and ask questions, and we'd like to have a really good debate over the next hour. But without further ado, I'd like to hand over to you, William.
Well, thank you very much, Paul, and also many thanks to Civitas for its support with this report. And it's interesting times. We're just coming out of COVID. We have a rather disappointing announcement a few weeks ago from Boris Johnson about funding, which I'll just deal very briefly in the run through that I'll give now. So what I'm going to do is spend 10 minutes going through the highlights of the Homecare and Supported Living Market Report, and then we'll go on to the other speakers, of course, and then questions and answers. So let's start off by going to the report highlights. So there they are. First of all, impact of COVID, strengths and weaknesses of home care and supported living businesses, market structure, economies of scale and scope, digitally enabled or tech-enabled home care, recruitment and retention, social care funding, and market potential. So let's just go through those one by one. So let's have the first slide. Now, what we found very interesting in the research that we carried out, we looked at the statutory accounts of about 70 providers of home care and supported living in order to find evidence of what the impact of COVID had been on their business. Now, to a report, they all said how well the staff had risen to the challenge and how grateful they were and what remarkable feat they performed. But interestingly, when it came down to the financial impact, nearly all of them were virtually nil, no impact, or if there was an impact, then the impact was mitigated to a very large extent, if not completely, by support from the Infection Control Fund and other public subsidies. So that is one very significant point about home care. Differs totally from care homes, where there is a very substantial impact. Also, mortality was much lower amongst home care and supported living service users than care home service users. Now, to a certain extent, you can expect that because of age, and supported living people, of course, are in a different age group. But one would have thought that for the older people receiving home care, that the visits of visiting carers, going to about 6 or 7 homes every day, that would be a way of spreading COVID. It turned out not to be, and although we don't have any hard figures, we do know that the mortality amongst home care users was very much lower than care homes. So 2 important points, significant benefit, I suppose, compared with care homes for home care and supported living. Let's go on to the next slide. So I'm just looking at weaknesses and strengths of the sector. Now, we all know what the weaknesses are. Main weakness, it's that funding from the public sector remains very low and inadequate. and that the willingness to pay is at the heart of the endemic recruitment and retention problems that the sector has. But it's all not all bad news. There are strengths. It's a growing domestic market, and of course people don't think about this, but it's not vulnerable to overseas competition. There's a broad shift, we know, from institutional care to care at home, and several profitable market niches. Also, we draw attention in the report to the potential efficiencies from consolidation, not at the grouping together more services, but it's at the individual service level consolidation in terms of caseload per service. And also, this is very important, the strong interest from investors, despite the history of exits. There have been about 8 major exits in the last decade. So let's go on to the next slide if we could. Said that the bad news is public sector funding and fee rates available, hourly rates available for home care providers, but not in every authority. There are some which are pretty bad, and there are some which are okay. And what we've done here is to look from, in fact, we took this data from Freedom of Information inquiries, and you'll see there for every single region there is a very wide disparity between the highest and the lowest payers in terms of pounds per hour. And each you see is a number of sort of squiggly lines, but each point in the line, each line represents an individual local authority. So there is really quite wide differences between different local authorities in the same region. So it really, to a very large extent, depends on where you want to do business, whether or not you're able to get a reasonable rate from local authorities. So that, in a sense, is a negative, but is also very much a positive as well. Let's go on to the next one. Market structure, 98% now of services supplied by the independent sector. If we go back 3 decades, that would have been maybe about 10% or so. So it's a massive, massive change. And really, there's no way, as I can see it, of turning that particular clock back. It remains highly fragmented. There's no truly large-scale provider, and I would say large-scale, £1 billion plus. The largest one with over 300 million is City and County, but no really large-scale yet. Limited consolidation. Now, we looked at the revenue from home care and supported living for the top 4 providers, and it adds up to just below 10% of the total market, and only just 1% higher than in 2013 to 14. So consolidation, very, very gradual. And also, of course, a significant micro provider presence. And the important thing about the micro providers is that they have very low overheads. Let's go on to the next slide. And this just illustrates what I just said about the slow rate of consolidation within the home care and supported living sector, showing the top 4 market share and also the top 10 market share, with rising quite gradually. Let's go on to the next slide, if we could. This is it's an interesting slide, which we've derived from research that we did looking at the CQC inspection reports in England, and each or nearly all inspection reports report the number of service users. So we're able to work out the number of service users per service. What we've done here is we've shown the distribution of service users by the caseload band. So service users, or services, sorry, with fewer than 30 users account for 54% of services. So huge, sort of measured in that way, it's pretty massive, the presence of the micro providers. But when you weight it by the number of service users actually using them, then that goes down to 13%. So in other words, 13% of users are in services which which cater for 30 or fewer service users. So that's pretty micro in a way. And you see there that the market leader, City and County, in fact, is up to about 125 caseload in terms of service users per service. So it does make a massive difference to the profitability. This is one of the factors that's really key to profitability of providers of home care and indeed supported living as well. So let's go on to the next slide. We're talking about economies of scale and scope. And just to reiterate what I just said about the last slide, there are substantial economies of scale at the individual service level, because what you're doing in effect is routing more volume of business through a single back office structure, and therefore spreading those costs more widely. But we can see no evidence, or very limited evidence, if at all, of economies of scale at the group enterprise level from operating a large number of services. And we can see no single facet of the home care and supported living business which confers a significant advantage on corporate operators. Now, some may agree with this, and there may well be some comeback from people listening now, but that's the view we take, that very limited economies of scale at the group level. Potentially, however, the larger groups do have significant economies of scope. What we mean by that is that they're better placed to take advantage of other opportunities which might appear in the future. And one particular thing we point to is the possibility, although it is something that is a long way from happening yet, of being able to provide services for integrated care systems when they get up and running, and hopefully integrate the totality of health and social care. And then we make a comment about brand names. They are important in private pay, but not really important for public pay. So let's go on to the next slide, if I could. Digitally enabled, tech-enabled home care. There's been an awful lot of discussion about this. Home care and supported living providers have been slow adopters in the past, but they are rapidly catching up now. All the evidence is that. And the interesting thing now is that although if I'd been talking about this report a year or two ago, all of the avowedly tech-enabled companies would have been small scale, but now there are two which are avowedly tech-enabled, which are quite large scale, including Home Instead, which has just been bought by the American, actually a tech-enabled company in the USA, and also Sierra, which has grown through the acquisition of Mighty, many of the Mighty services. So to my mind, the big question is, will these tech-enabled groups with proprietary systems prove to have a competitive advantage over those using one of the many online platforms which are available off the shelf for all scales of provider? So will proprietary systems win out over what is available to everyone? Next slide. Social care funding. The analysis of this, it seems to us to be extremely disappointing. A step in the right direction is a charitable description. £36 billion over 3 years, but only 5.8 billion earmarked for social care, and only starting in 2023. And most of it will go into system reform and not into core services. So we're going to have the 3-year spending review at the end of October. That will present another opportunity for injecting more money into core services. But from the letters that we've seen from the Treasury, it is unlikely. The positive side, I suppose, is that with the new system that's been announced of the care cost cap, then private pay may be stimulated. But this is something that is still a little way off. So next slide, if you could. Market potential. I mentioned before integrated care systems, the big idea of the NHS, and within this there is the possibility, though it's not emerging, not likely to emerge immediately, of the independent sector providing services on behalf of these ICCSs. And particularly, there's one area that stands out as being this huge opportunity for synergies, and that is council-funded home care and NHS-funded community health services. Well, often there's an overlap, and often there are duplicated functions. And one could imagine, I suppose, in the fullness of time, the idea of that the the two ends of the home care continuum, which is basic home care, visiting home care, and clinical home care, one on the other end, actually moving together. Though obviously both have very different drivers at the moment, but that is something, a market potential possibly to come. And I think that's my last slide, but if you can just, yes it is. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much, William. That was fascinating. Just before we go to the other panelists, I've just struck in your reports by your comment about, I think in the last 3 decades or so, something like 98% of these services used to be provided by local authorities and are now provided by private providers, which mirrors our experience too. What do you think was the reason for that? What was the genesis for that? I know we're going back a bit, but it's just interesting in the context of the wider, I always say in society, I think most people would think that the NHS runs all of care, and actually, of course, it doesn't. So.
Right. Well, a few decades ago, there was a privately funded home care market, but it wasn't very big. What was the difference? Well, there was this thing called, and I can't, it's so long ago that I can't remember the name of it, but it was a grant which was provided after 1993, the community care reforms. The condition for that grant is that 50% of it should be spent on independent sector providers, and that really triggered a mass exodus of the local authorities from home care and handing it over to for-profit and not-for-profit providers.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So a clear, societal decision, government decision. So
government decisions are key. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Many thanks. So Andy, would you like to tell us a bit about Eden Futures, and then it'd be great to hear about your initial thoughts and responses to William's report.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So Eden Futures is a supported living provider. We provide services to about 650 service users in a mixture of shared house, apartment, blocks where service users have their own front door, and then more recently some more specialist bungalow provision where we support people very much coming out of the transforming care agenda. We are backed by sovereign capital and very much on growth trajectory. I think from my perspective, COVID-wise, our experience very much mirrors what William was talking about. So we haven't had any deaths of either service users or staff, little in the way of serious illness either, and limited financial impact. Lots of costs, but then lots of income coming in that from, as William said, the Infection Control Fund and other public sector sources that netted it off. I think from the future of supported living, there's still a lot of growth to come, and as very much from our perspective, looking towards the more specialist provision. There's lots of demand still for people in hospitals and residential care to come into the more independent supported living facilities that we can provide. So hopefully that's a bit of a background on us.
Great. And your initial thoughts on the report?
Yes, as I say, from COVID, I agree with the impact. I think otherwise, I think there's lots of growth to come in supported living. I think the tech side in the supported living sector is still one that we wait to see. That there's always been the talk of monitoring to take out sleep-ins. That hasn't really happened on a grand scale. I think that is one that we will continue to look towards.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Andy. And Martin, over to you. Tell us about Home Instead, and then also your thoughts on the LaingBuisson report.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and thanks William and LaingBuisson for that excellent report and inviting me this morning. Home Instead, we are a brand, one of the largest home care providers in the UK, and we're the largest provider of home care globally by some mile. In the UK, we've got over 250 offices providing care just shy of 18,000 clients, giving care to about, last look, about just under 11 million hours of care, with 16,500 caregivers right across the UK. And some reflections, obviously, on the report. William's right that we have been acquired by the Honour Group, which is really exciting in August of this year. And I'll talk a bit about that later on, and that really does bleed nicely into tech-enabled care and how we can really revolutionise what we do, but also the sector and the people around us. Some reflections on the excellent report that's been put together. Yes, I agree with what Andy said in terms of COVID. You know, we were hit initially in terms of the challenges, obviously, that it gave us. But I think what it did show, not just in Homestead, but right across the sectors, William's picked up the resilience of the sector as a whole. And it's no surprise from a home care perspective that we weren't hit as hard from the COVID, because people are very safe and well in their own home, and it really pushed home care as potentially, you know, moving up the ladder, because within social care, you know, and it's still the case, you know, the government and other people and Joe Public think of care homes, which obviously have a great place, but obviously home care needs to be pushed to the fore as well. I think there, you know, financially wise, obviously our business continues to grow and is very strong. But I think there's some hidden elements that probably won't always show up on P&Ls in terms of, you know, there's a challenge for us all in terms of recruitment and retention, which is always a hidden cost. But I think William was right in the sense that the sector as a whole did exceptionally well. And the other thing I think was a great reflection from the report is the healthcare at home. You know, the end-to-end care continuum, looking after a client as they age, as their needs progress, that home care is starting to develop, whereby we can wrap our arms right around the client, right from when they start the services with us to right to end of life. You know, so we've been reaching out. We've got a training process which we've done with the City and Guilds, which is about end of life training, bespoke training as well. And I think to make the end-to-end process, we're doing a lot of healthcare in people's home now, because obviously services are stretched, and that's going to continue to be so. So how we can, from the healthcare at home perspective, and then how you can use tech as well, how you can use tech to support people to live well and long in their own home is a great opportunity for us all in the sector. And we need to be digitally brave in terms of the people we attract to the sector and the technology that we use. So thank you very much. Back to you, Paul.
Thanks very much, Martin. That was great. Now, again, shall we touch perhaps upon something that might be controversial for those of you that run care companies, but given, again, the picture that William paints in the report of, you know, really quite severe recruitment problems and retention problems, and, you know, the nexus of the social care revolution the government's announced, but actually very clear gaps between that and what resources are potentially needed. What do you think the answers are to, you know, basically making care a very attractive profession going forward for young people? Martin?
Yeah, I think I can kick that one off. I think for me, it's really about, we need to professionalise the roles within care, and that's not just the people, the sharp end, the care workers, but actually all the back house and the care managers, etc. We really need to make it a sector of choice, because there's no better sector, no more rewarding sector in terms of what our caregivers do and our care managers and the people who support the sector, but how can we attract? So obviously during COVID, we all saw the spike whereby hospitality, leisure, you know, were shut, we know we're closed down. And I think at our peak, we had over 18,000 hits to our website wanting jobs at some point over the summer months. What we need to do is, you know, keep those people, attract those people, develop those people, and have some succession planning for those people to say, this is a long-term career view. I don't believe we should add more bureaucracy in terms of putting things in people's way to enter the sector as well. Because you want basically, I think from our perspective, it's about attracting those who've got the heart, who've got the compassion, who want to make a difference. You can train them the rest, so I think that's what we need to do from my perspective. But linking up with not just bodies within social care, we need to look wider, other groups and look outside in terms of sitting guilds and other training providers and give them probably portable skills that they could transfer to other sectors and come in and out, because I think that's really, really important. The employment market's changed beyond recognition. Pre-COVID, it had changed. People don't stay in jobs for life now. It is very, very different. And we've kind of not moved with that. We've kind of had not any workforce strategy to deal with that. Thanks very much.
Andy, any thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, I agree with everything that Martin says. I think pay is always it's mentioned, but I do think that it's more than that. It is about building a career pathway. We're actually today 10 of our leading managers together, trying to deliver an internal development course to them to really get them into leaders of the future. I think it is things like that, the softer things that you can do, and wider than that. You'd love to see government going back to those days where the clap was done for social care as much as the NHS. You'd love to see that coming through in policy terms, but we'll wait for that.
Wait a while.
And William, I've got a question for you actually from Nancy Hollander, which picks up on another point that you make in the report about the, I guess, disappointing lack of combining between the NHS and social care. And she asks, I'll summarise, that perhaps more money to LAs was not considered a judicious use of funds. Do we not think that the grand hope is that more NHS money will transfer into the community from NHS commissioners, I can see everyone smiling, hospitals, as an expedient way to free up space in hospital to support the backlog? So that was for you, William.
The NHS doesn't have a great history as far as sharing its funding. The acute hospitals absorb, it seems, everything that is available. So I don't really see it'll happen, and the better improved better care fund shows that it is possible to get money out of the NHS and into social care, but it's not really the answer. I fear that there is a view in government that if you give money to local authorities, then the money, as they put it, sticks to the sides. It doesn't get to the places it's supposed to go to. And I'm not sure I would subscribe to that view at all. So no, I think there will be money from the NHS, but it's not the best way to go forward. I wouldn't have thought.
Martin, I saw you shaking your head there a lot, so I can't waste the opportunity to ask you what you think.
No, I think William hit the nail on the head, really, in terms of, we constantly see, not just from the money in terms of perception. I mean, the NHS has done a great job, there's no doubt about that. And they are under pressure, there's no doubt about that as well. But the answer isn't always pouring money into the NHS. There has to be a different solution, and there has to be, we have to be braver as a society and with government as well to actually put more money into social care, because that's the preventative element, isn't it? And, and I think if you look at what Andy Burnham's trying to do in Greater Manchester in terms of try to share that public purse around, it's proved incredibly difficult. But you can't just keep on putting more and more funds at the end of the care continuum. It's more cost effective, and it's better for the patient or client, whichever you want to call it, in terms of you have that early intervention, which is all these people around the table and in terms of social care. So unfortunately, the NHS seems to have this grip on society, grip on the government, and Joe Public has this perception about NHS is probably the same as social care. I don't think the general public really gets the difference. And Andy made a great point in terms of the clap for carers. It's now starting to retrench again, and it's all back to the NHS, and the NHS awards you the night, and watch every night there's a programme about paramedics or nurses, and when you do see a social care programme, generally it's not that good, certainly, and it's very negative. We have to change that. We have to turn it on its head.
I think no one in the public knows that the NHS doesn't do social care until they need social care. That's my view. Now, Andy, I've just realised that I've got questions coming in plus comments coming in on another button plus it's talking to you. So this is phasing me in terms of my aged technological skills. But I have a question for the panel, but I'll start with you, Andy, and it's from Tim Nand. And it says, I wonder if the panel had one thing they would ask of commissioners to help improve the way services are delivered and overcome some of the issues they are facing. Putting you on the spot there.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it would be very much hopefully working increasingly in partnership, particularly where, going back to the discussion just now on the NHS, where we support some of our more complex service users, where there's joint CCG and LA commissioning, very much working together as a partnership, rather than sometimes the them and us type culture that can happen. Not always, don't get me wrong, but can happen. So I would love to see more joined up working between the two, and probably just more the partnership in terms of longer term thinking about which service users are in the pathway, which environments are right for them.
And then William?
Well, I couldn't say, I totally agree with Andy. It's a bigger voice for the independent sector. They've got virtually all the supply, but they don't have a voice.
Yeah. Martin?
Both comments really made, but also more thought about the end user and what they're commissioning for. For me, I think there needs to be more choice, which is what we seem to lack. And if we give more choice to the person who's receiving the service, and I think that, and how we can use the funds more appropriately, that would be for me. But completely agree in terms of the partnership and what have you. We need to start working together rather than against each other. It doesn't happen all over, but it does happen quite a lot by region.
In terms of I don't know if you have, it's obviously a different subject, but there are overlaps. So one of the things that we say in Civitas that we're interested in is, if you consider that there are 70 million people or so living in Britain, most of them are adequately housed, they might want different types of accommodation, but actually the 500,000 people, the most vulnerable, who have special care need or indeed living in temporary accommodation. And the big feature about all those people is that they're having a terrible social outcome, but the cost to the state is actually enormous by not acting. And this was played out this morning in a terrible case around imprisonment of women who are pregnant, and basically they're not being specialist facilities. And do you think we're winning the arguments about this? Do you think government hears that, obviously the wider picture around investment looks enormous, but actually the targeted approach, the individual approach, which I think you were touching on, Martin, is the way forward? It's not structures of institutions, it's the money following the individual. What do you think? Anyone?
Right, okay, if I can just comment on that. Targeting, great idea, if you can find the right targets. The government, I sympathise with the government, because there they are, they're faced with demands from everyone. Demands from social care, demand from the NHS, demand from the justice system, demands. And everyone has a very valid point to make. Yet we know that there are limited tax funds available. So yes, perhaps that's maybe the big idea that we have to go to for all state services, state-funded services, It's a matter of targeting rather than better targeting than now.
Martin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I hate to say this publicly, but you have got to sympathise with the government sometimes, because whichever way they turn at the moment, people are requesting more funds. And that's not just in social care and health, it's transport, it's environment, it's et cetera, et cetera. So they have to be more creative, but they do have to be more efficient with what they've got. And I think maybe if we start tracking the money to the end user, I think that could be one of those solutions in terms of, are we getting really good value for money in terms of outcomes? And I think that could be, obviously could be quite complex to do that, but obviously that's where tech could maybe play a part. I don't know.
I just think that if you look at the numbers, I get the points about government being overwhelmed, but if you actually break it down into groups, the numbers become quite manageable in terms of who you need to target. But it's just a thought of mine, really. I've got a question, start with you, Andy, from Phil Murphy, and it says, is there an argument for more in-house public sector provision, perhaps in partnership with the independent sector?
I'm not so sure on that. I guess I would say that, wouldn't I? But I think that when it works really well, we got numerous examples where working together with local authority and CCG colleagues, we can deliver great outcomes for service users, and actually in a cost-effective manner as well. So I think that the key is, moving those best practices across, and how do we share that best practice across the various parties that we all work with, so that we can all work in a more joined up, I guess, efficient manner. Because when we are working with multiple local authorities and CCGs with multiple processes, it becomes, frankly, highly inefficient at times.
And Martin, it says here, it'd be great to hear more about the acquisition of Home Instead and how the business is expected to always result. Probably never a better opportunity for you to give an advertorial.
Yeah, obviously it happened in August of this year. We're on a acquired Homestead, which is our global operation as well as the UK operation. For those who know, Honor, it's really about tech-enabled care, but really revolutionising how we deliver that care, and really how the care worker really, in terms of, delivers that care. So what we're hoping to do, and what we are going to do, is really think, well, it's not just about the tech in terms of the care plans and all those sort of things, which are really, really important, but other things. So how can you enable a client to stay well and safe in their own home, and whether that's in terms of keeping the lights on, changing the bulb, everything. So really, in terms of tech that surrounds the client, that they can, stay well and safe, and really link into, not just within Home Instead, and this is where it does get cleverer, in terms of linking into NHS, GPs, etc., family members, to really get that, pathway in terms of the safe, the well, but giving those using intelligence and data. And that's a dreadful word, and we all love it, but data in terms of start more predictions. So they are a tech business. They've got a big home care business already within the US as well. So it's really exciting times. But we're just at the early stages in terms of how we can bring it to the UK, and how we can, I hate the word Uberize it because that's a brand, but how we can really change the way that care is delivered, rather than just buying up care businesses. It's going to really revolutionise what we do and the way we operate. But most importantly of all, client focused and caregiver focused, absolutely critically in that sense.
Great, thank you. I've got questions pouring in now, as is always the way as time leaves us. So a question from Jim Lennon. Anyone please answer if you feel able. Does your local health and social care board include the needs of their older LGBTQ plus community in their joint needs analysis as they're required to do? Is anyone familiar with this issue?
Right, I don't have any knowledge of that, I'm afraid. So I think it's probably better answered by people who have local experience of personnel.
Okay.
No, actually, I'm not sure on that one either, I'm afraid.
If anyone on the participants, please do respond to that one. And from Paul Davis, does the panel agree that the lack of reliable official data on client numbers and hours mitigates against providing effective public policy on funding?
Well, if I might put in the first word here, the quality of, and the availability of data on the home care sector is appalling. It all goes back, I think, to 2013 to 14, when a new system for collecting official information under the SALT returns was, and they simply left out things that shouldn't have been left out. It is, I would say, it's extremely difficult to actually get to any sensible and reproducible year on year estimates of market values or market volumes. So something really should be done about that.
Yeah, and I think just to back that up, I think in the early stages of the pandemic, when the government were scrapping around for any usable bits of data for home care, because I'm on the UKHA board, there was a dearth of information, and I think that contributed to some of the actions that the government took, because they didn't have the right to. William makes a great point in terms of it's shocking as a sector how little data we have combined and how accurate it is, because we do see some often it's not that accurate, with the exception of LaingBuisson's reports, of course.
And Andy, I guess you
completely agree. Yeah, you get that there's some data out there. The data the NHS released in terms of service users in hospital wait transforming care on the transforming care pathway is useful in terms of looking forward, but it'd be great to see more on that scale, really.
Does the panel think that the current regulatory framework approach of regulators is sufficiently supportive of social care providers and recognises the challenges faced by the sector? What do you think, Andy?
I think that it's clearly evolved. The regulatory environment's evolving at the moment. Clearly, the previous regime of more regular inspections is being moved away from towards a more data-led approach. I guess we're still waiting to see how that all plays out in the fullness of time once hopefully COVID drops away a bit more and where that's going. So it'd be great to see a bit more, I think, forward thought really in terms of where they're heading with the regulatory approach.
Yeah, no, oh, sorry.
No, please.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. I think it's a great point well made in the sense what Andy just said, but also as well, the regulators across the four nations, because one of the biggest challenges that we had was obviously the different regulations by nation is a challenge. I think the regulator at the moment in terms of their outreach and looking at what's good within the sector has kind of disappeared. And it disappeared pre-COVID, so it's nothing to do with COVID. So I think, yes, I think we need to use data, but they need to obviously, start to provide us with why are they there? And I think that's been lost, and it's nothing to do with COVID because it was starting to happen pre-COVID in terms of what was their remit, what's their strategy, and yes, they produce papers, but I think through the pandemic, you didn't feel that it was very supportive in terms of some of the regulatory activity. And again, by the four nations was very, very challenging to actually support the clients at the end of the day, which is what it's all about.
Great. I've got a question from Tim Nand again. We are looking to boost the volume of replacement care that is available to give carers a break. Does the panel have any ideas on how we can encourage providers to offer more replacement care, respite, and how it can be budgeted in advance. This has been a particular problem during the pandemic. One for the providers, I guess.
I'm not quite sure of the question, if I'm honest, in terms of, I obviously can read, so I know what the question says. But in terms of, in terms of respite care, it's something that we certainly provide, and we do provide, and we ensure, because it's really important you give the care workers a chance to refresh themselves and not get overworked, and obviously to train them and develop them as well, which is important. So yeah, I think that's what the question was about.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is saying, how do we get more? It's desperately needed. How do we get more?
Yeah, and I think, in terms of, it depends on the client's needs and wants and outcomes, and I do think that's where technology may be able to play a part in that, so it's taking some pressure off the caregiver. But again, it depends on the individual instances, and I think it's a challenge to us all to enable, to ensure that we give them as much time, not just to reboot, but obviously for us to support them and to retrain and ensure the mental well-being is supported. And that was a big thing over the last 20 months particularly, but still a big thing going forward. Yeah,
I mean, the big thing that comes out of the report as well, and it's the experience of Civitas' day-to-day work, is the bravery, really, lots of care workers during the pandemic in making sure they looked after their residents. But I mean, obviously that's not sustainable forever. So it would seem that some respite care is absolutely vital. So I've had a question and comment about VAT, John Griffiths, who suggests that change it from an exempt rate service to zero rated. That would mean providers could then claim back VAT spent, putting cash back into the system. Seeing lots of nodding there.
Yeah, I mean, we ran a campaign probably 6 to 8 months ago now, with a few of the care providers, home care providers got together, and we started to run a campaign together on this, and we have written to the Treasury, because it's a great point, well made. Let's simple things like that, and I think that's where the government could be more creative. I know the Chancellor's looking at some insurance-backed home care packages and how we can plan for long-term care. But some things we could do here and now, we'll be looking at things like zero rate on VAT. So we can use those funds to reinvest back into sector, reinvest in our people, and hence improve the care that we offer our clients. So that's, we ran a campaign to town, and we're not going to stop beating that drum, and we will resurrect that again.
I would very much agree with that, because VAT, being able to claim back input VAT, that's something that would go direct to the providers, whereas other ways in which you put money into the system may not go direct to the providers. And also because VAT, you wouldn't notice it. If you look at the take from VAT, the difference that that small policy would make would be virtually unnoticeable.
Yeah. We did start to look in terms of, believe it or not, there is a VAT club which all the big 6 accountancy firms get together and talk to the government about, which is not a club any of us would want to go to. But KPMG and GT and others, so we've engaged in that group as well in terms of trying to influence. And William makes a great point. It's a drop in the ocean in terms of, from the government's revenue perspective, but a big impact for us and how we could reinvest for training, development, respite, etc., in our caregivers, and in terms of care managers, etc., and obviously better care for the clients.
Andy?
Nothing really to add. I obviously completely agree. It's always seemed perverse to me that this sector is picked out as one that's being treated like this and isn't allowed to claim the VAT, and in my experience has led to long and costly disputes with HMRC as well, which is entirely unhelpful. So yes, it would be a great move forward.
I've got a really nice question here as they all were, but this is about you as in your own role. And this is a question for all of you. What will be your commitment towards changing and enhancing the social care sector as individuals? As if you don't do enough in your day job.
What would be, or
what will be?
What will be?
Yeah.
Well, we are a mere provider of information and analysis and commentary, so we'll continue to do that.
Great.
And from my perspective, I think day by day, everything we do is geared towards giving a greater level of person-centred care. We're all about supporting people to live independently. From my personal perspective, it's about making the life of those that actually deliver that care as easy and as straightforward as possible, so they can spend the maximum amount of time providing the great support to our service users.
Martin?
Yeah, from the business perspective, it's really championing what a great sector this is to work, and attracting more people to work with us and retaining those people, and obviously delivering great quality care to our clients, and sharing best practice within the sector. I think that's really important, that we work at a sector even more collaboratively than we do. And I think from a personal perspective, I'm a trustee of Age UK, I'm a trustee of Silverline, I'm a UKHA board and TSA board, and I will continue to really fight for this sector. I think it's really important that we become as collegiate and as collaborative as we possibly can to challenge the government and others and attract more innovation into the sector. And that's not just tech, I'm talking about innovation, how we do things. And I think we need to reach out to the sector a lot more. And that's what I'm going to really start to focus on personally, using those different boards and more within Homestead and others.
Thanks very much. And William, in terms of a report like this, and obviously it's incredibly useful for all of us, and and obviously available to purchase the longer version. What else happens with this? What kind of engagement do you have with other parties and the sector and governments once you publish something like this? How does that work?
Right. Well, first of all, we're in touch with the press, the media. I was just speaking this morning to Jill Climmer of the Financial Times. So we try to, put into the public domain as much of the knowledge that as we can, and that's a steady drip feed. So I hope that's useful. We engage with government to a certain extent. We're quite frequently asked to bid for contracts, whether it's ourselves alone or with partner consultancies. We've done quite a bit of that, and we can get our ideas across there as well. Local authorities we speak to as well. So it's a sort of drip feed, as I see it.
Great. Well, obviously anything that we can do to help. We're very interested in continuing the debate, and it's absolutely vital debate. I've got a quick fire round from Jan Burns. What is your one top tip that you feel could innovate, revolutionise care? Starting with Martin.
I think it goes back to what I said before. Let's reach outside the sector. We're not going to find innovation from within the sector. Let's reach out to other sectors in terms of other sectors who've done things very, very differently, and other brands that have done things very, very differently. So being more outward facing to how we can support our clients and teams to live, to work better and live longer. That's what I'm going to do, and I think it could be good for us all to do that, because I think we can be sometimes a bit narrow focused in the people we speak to. And there's some great practices going out there that are transferable into the sector, particularly in recruitment, retention, training, etc. For the, look at other brands that really establish themselves. So that's what I think is a great thing to do.
Thanks, Andy.
I think for me, again, about recruitment, I think making that end-to-end recruitment to onboarding to career as exciting and as fulfilling as possible for people, and really making that career pathway so that the leaders of tomorrow are the support workers that start today.
Thanks, William.
Certainly the recruitment and retention thing is key. I basically cannot, although I take the point that people are motivated not just by money, they're motivated, they're vocationally motivated, but nevertheless, I really cannot see that the sector can continue this 30% churn, and the only way out of that seems to me to be to raise pay rates really quite substantially, but I cannot see how that can be done. The other thing I would say is to have some serious conversations between commissioners and providers, and indeed the users of the care service, about actually how to specify the care services they're offered, because it is simply too limited at the moment, and commissioners tend to fall back on the somewhat outdated time and task without looking at other possibilities.
Great. Someone here said check out Toyota. Phil Murphy, I assume that refers to smart thinking around process, but we haven't got time. Maybe for the next seminar, we can open up with Toyota. I just wanted to say thank you very much to all of the panelists who've been absolutely fantastic. In terms of my contribution to some of those questions, at a recent housing and healthcare conference, I was slaughtered for talking about how important it was public and private and charitable all work in unison. Someone said it was motherhood and apple pie, but I do think passionately that that's the only way that all of this focus can be, absolutely focused on the individual. And just for a bit of publicity's sake, in terms of Civitas, we are producing a book of 50 stories of people with a learning disability, which feature people who live in our properties, and that'll be available later this year, which I think is really where the LaingBuisson report is absolutely vital, but hearing the stories of individuals as well is absolutely vital too. So there's a slide up saying thank you for joining. I think Jade is also going to talk about your next seminar at LaingBuisson, which I hope you'll be able to join, which is the Social Care and Retirement Living Conference on Tuesday the 5th of October. That looks like it's a live event, so even more exciting than being online. But thank you very much for all participating today, all of your questions and comments. Thank you in particular to LaingBuisson and William for the outstanding reports, and thank you very much to Martin and Andy for their sterling contributions. So thank you very much.